Work the evening shift at a warehouse just outside Chicago. The place starts to quiet down after 5. Trucks gone, lights dimmed, the whole yard settling into silence. But most evenings, right after school, a group of boys shows up. They ride their bikes through the empty lots, toss balls against the loading docks, play tag between the shadows of old containers. I never chased them off. They weren't causing trouble. And truth is, their laughter made this forgotten place feel almost human again. One Tuesday, I noticed something different. The boys had gathered behind the old shipping bay, quieter than usual, all looking toward the same spot. I stepped out of my booth and walked over. That's when I saw him, a German Shepherd puppy, maybe 6 or 7 months old, thin, dirty, legs too long for his frame. He was lying on a flattened cardboard box next to a rusted barrel, alert but still, watching everyone with those wide, cautious eyes. One of the boys, David, was crouched beside him, holding out a half-eaten burger. The pup inched forward, sniffed it, then took it gently and backed away to his corner. "He's been living here," David said quietly. "I think someone left him." I didn't say much, just nodded and walked back to my post. But I watched. David kept coming back, every evening, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone, always with something for the pup. Chicken, bread, crackers, and always that gentle voice, like he was talking to a scared friend who didn't speak the same language. One evening, David pulled something bright from his backpack, a red sock. He waved it, laughed, then tossed it gently. The pup jumped up, caught it, and for the first time I saw his tail move. Not just a wag joy, real reckless joy. From that day on, the sock was always with him. David named him Rocky. Rocky would chew on the sock, sleep with it tucked under his chin, paw at it like it was the only thing in the world that belonged to him. He slept every night beside that old barrel, curled up on a pallet of broken wood, holding that sock like it was family. And every evening, like clockwork, David came back, until one day he didn't. At first, I didn't think much of it. Kids get busy, parents ground them, school piles up. But then a second day passed. Then a third. And still no sign of David. Rocky waited each evening, just like before. He'd sit near the edge of the loading dock, ears perking every time tires crunched in the gravel or a bike chain rattled in the distance, but no one came. The red sock was still there. He didn't chew it anymore, just kept it close, tucked under his chin, like it was the last piece of something good he didn't want to lose. I started leaving food out, a bowl of dry kibble I picked up from the corner store, some water. At first he didn't touch it, just sniffed and walked away. He looked thinner, slower, like he was trying to hold himself together, waiting for something that wasn't coming. On the 4th evening, I sat outside my booth longer than usual. Rocky didn't move when I approached. He just looked up at me, eyes dull, tail still. That playful pup I used to watch chasing a sock through the dirt was gone. All that was left was something small and quiet and waiting. I asked one of the other boys, Daniel, if he'd seen David. He looked away, kicked a rock, and mumbled. "Didn't you hear?" "Hear what?" I asked, standing still. "He got hit," Daniel said. "On his bike, a couple blocks from here. He's in the hospital. Not waking up?" My chest went cold. I didn't remember what I said after that. I looked at Rocky, who had laid his head back down beside the sock. He didn't know. Not really, but maybe he felt it. That night, I drove to the hospital. I left Rocky outside, tied loosely to a tree across the street, wrapped in an old flannel I kept in my car. He didn't fight it, just watched me go, eyes heavy. Inside, I found the pediatric wing and asked about David. The nurse hesitated, but when I told her I wasn't family, just someone who knew him from the neighborhood, she softened and pointed me toward room 312. David was there, pale, small, so different from the boy who used to laugh while throwing a sock across cracked concrete. Tubes, machines, monitors blinking like distant stars. His parents sat nearby, eyes sunken, holding each other's hands but not really holding on. I introduced myself, told them I worked nearby, that I'd seen David with a dog, a stray, really. But more than that, something special. "He called him Rocky," I said. They were always together. "That dog's been waiting for him every single day." The father looked up first. The mother followed, her face tightening. "We don't want a dog near him," she said, her voice sharp, tired. "Not here." Not now. I nodded, tried to smile.
Of course.
I just thought you should know. They didn't respond. I walked out slowly, heart heavier with each step. I crossed the street and knelt beside Rocky. His tail wagged once, hopeful. I looked into his eyes. "I'm sorry, buddy," I whispered. They said no. I tried. I really did. He stared at me, then turned his head toward the hospital, and I swear I knew he wasn't done. I sat with him for a while, thinking he might give up, that he'd follow me back to the warehouse, maybe curl up beside the heater like he used to near the barrel. But Rocky didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the glass doors of the hospital. He was waiting, still hoping, still believing. It was getting late. I stood, stretched my legs, and glanced at the sky. Snow was starting to fall, just a light dusting. Barely sticking, but it made everything feel quieter. Still. I leaned down to untie the flannel from the tree. But before I could finish, the automatic doors hushed open, and Rocky bolted. I shouted his name out of instinct, not logic, but he was already halfway across the street, paws slipping on the wet pavement, socks still hanging from his mouth like a lifeline. He ducked under the opening doors before they could close. I ran after him, heart pounding. A security guard saw me burst through the entrance, eyes wide. "You can't have a dog in here," he snapped. I didn't stop. I just shouted, "He's here for a reason," and kept going. Rocky didn't bark, didn't run wild. He moved through those sterile halls like he'd been there before, like he knew exactly where he was going. 3rd floor, room 312. By the time I caught up, the hallway was empty. Room 312's door was closed, but just beneath the frame, I saw it, a tail barely wagging, low to the ground. I peeked in. David's parents were gone, maybe stepped out for coffee or to breathe for a second. And there was Rocky, curled up under the hospital bed, sock between his paws, his head resting against one of David's feet. The boy hadn't moved, but Rocky had found him anyway. I stood in the doorway, not sure whether to cry or apologize. Then I heard a soft voice behind me. "Is that him?" A nurse, young, kind eyes. I nodded. "His name's Rocky. They were always together. He snuck in." She looked at the boy, then at the dog, then back at me. "I won't say anything," she said. "As long as he stays hidden, quiet." "He will," I whispered. "He just wants to be near him." From that night on, Rocky never left. He stayed tucked under the bed, hidden in the shadows, only coming out when the room was quiet. The nurse brought him food when she could. I visited after every shift, checked on him, gave him water, whispered updates he probably didn't need, but he listened anyway. Every night he curled beside David's feet. Every night he watched him, protected him, waited. Days passed like soft echoes in that hospital room. The machines hummed, the monitors blinked, nurses came and went, but Rocky never moved far from David's side. Sometimes, when the nurse adjusted the blanket or checked a monitor, Rocky would lift his head, alert, as if guarding a piece of the boy's soul. When the lights dimmed at night, he'd rest his head near David's hand, nose brushing the edge of the bed, eyes half open even in sleep. The sock was always there, faded now, but still bright enough to remind me of the boy's laughter and the dog's joy in the warehouse yard. The staff began to notice, of course. You can't hide a German Shepherd for long, not even one as quiet as Rocky. But word spread in whispers, the story of a stray who found his way back to his best friend. Some nurses left scraps of food by the door. One even brought a small blanket for him to lie on. Others would simply smile when they passed the room, pretending not to see. The parents, though, didn't know. Not at first. They barely spoke those days. They moved like shadows, sitting through hours of silence broken only by machines. I sometimes wondered if they believed in miracles anymore. On the 7th night, I arrived late. Snow had started falling again, heavier this time, swirling under the hospital lights like ghosts. I was drenched from the walk, my hands numb, but when I opened the door to room 312, I stopped cold. The mother was there, kneeling beside the bed, and Rocky was sitting in front of her, still as stone. She wasn't crying. She was just staring at him. "He's been here the whole time?" she asked, not looking at me. Her voice was soft, almost breaking. I nodded. "Since the night he ran in. He doesn't make a sound. Just waits." She touched the red sock between Rocky's paws, her fingers trembling. "This was David's, wasn't it?" Yes, I said. It's all he had left from him. She didn't say anything for a while, just kept her hand on the sock, staring at the boy who hadn't moved in days. Then she whispered, "He loved that dog." And for the first time I saw her eyes fill with tears. From that moment on, things changed a little. The parents didn't chase Rocky away. They didn't speak much to me either, but they didn't object when I came to feed him. Some nights I even caught the father sitting in the chair by the window, Rocky's head resting on his shoe. Maybe it comforted him. The steady warmth of something loyal, something still breathing when everything else felt like it was fading. Winter deepened. Christmas lights appeared outside, glittering through the falling snow, reflecting off the hospital glass. Inside, time seemed to slow. The boy slept. The dog waited. Some of the nurses began hanging small decorations in the hallways, paper stars, garlands, tiny trees on the counters. Someone even tied a red ribbon around Rocky's collar. He didn't mind. He just wagged his tail once, then went back to his quiet post. On Christmas Eve, I stayed longer than usual. The hospital was nearly silent except for distant footsteps and the faint murmur of carols from a TV down the hall. I sat beside the bed, watching the boy breathe, slow but steady. I glanced at Rocky. "He's fighting, huh?" I whispered. Rocky's ears twitched. He lifted his head and gave a soft whine, barely a sound but full of meaning. "You miss him, don't you?" I said. His eyes met mine, and I swear he understood every word. Around midnight, something happened. I don't know if it was the hush of the snow or the glow from the lights outside, but the air in the room felt different, lighter, almost alive. The monitors flickered softly, the rhythmic beep steady but calm. Then, for the first time in weeks, David's fingers moved. Just a twitch at first, barely there. Rocky lifted his head instantly, tail beating once against the floor. I froze. "Nurse!" I whispered sharply, but before I could stand, the nurse who'd always helped us opened the door quietly, like she'd felt it too. She hurried to the bedside, checking vitals, eyes wide. "He moved," I said. She nodded, smiling through the shock. "Sometimes they do, but—" And then David's lips parted, a faint breath catching in his throat. His eyelids fluttered once, twice, and then slowly opened. Rocky was already standing, front paws on the edge of the bed, eyes locked on the boy's face. "Mom?" David's voice was hoarse, weak. "Where's Rocky?" His mother came running in seconds later, gasping, crying, calling his name over and over. But David wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the brown eyes staring back at him from the foot of the bed. "Rocky," he whispered. The dog climbed up carefully, curling beside him, the sock still in his mouth. The monitor beeped faster, steady and strong. The nurse smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. I stood back, my heart pounding like I'd just seen a miracle happen in real time. And maybe I had. In the days that followed, word spread through the hospital like wildfire. The boy who woke when his dog came. Reporters called. People sent letters. The staff laughed and cried and whispered about faith, love, and loyalty. The hospital even allowed Rocky to stay officially, calling him a therapy dog. He got his own little ID badge, which the nurses joked about clipping to his collar. David began to heal slowly but surely. Physical therapy, short walks down the corridor, laughter that filled the hallways again. And through it all, Rocky stayed beside him, tail wagging, eyes always on his boy. One morning I came by early. David was sitting up, weak but smiling, feeding Rocky bits of scrambled egg from his breakfast tray. "He never left me, did he said. "Not once," I replied. "He found you when no one else could." David grinned, his small hand scratching Rocky's ear. "I think he saved me." "Maybe you saved each other," I said. A few weeks later, David was discharged. The doctors called it a miracle recovery. His parents looked 10 years younger, smiling for the first time in months. The hospital staff lined the hallway as David walked out with Rocky trotting proudly beside him, tail high, red sock hanging from his mouth like a flag of victory. Outside, the snow was melting, puddles forming along the curb. I watched them from a distance. David stepping into the sunlight, his parents beside him, Rocky leading the way. I thought that was the end of it. A happy ending, clean and perfect. But life has a way of testing the things it gives back. Months passed. Spring came. Flowers replaced snow, and the warehouse yard filled again with the laughter of children. David visited sometimes after school, riding his bike down the familiar road, Rocky running beside him. They'd stop by my booth, wave, talk for a bit, then race through the lot like old times. Everything seemed right again, until the night the storm came. It started with a low rumble in the distance, the kind of thunder that makes windows tremble before the rain even begins. I was closing up early that night. The sky looked angry, swollen with dark clouds that rolled across the horizon like waves. The kids had all gone home hours ago, but David had promised he'd stop by after dinner to show me something. His school project, I think. I didn't expect him to come in weather like this, but when I stepped outside to check the gate, I heard it. The faint squeak of bicycle brakes and the patter of paws against gravel. "You shouldn't be out here!" I shouted as the wind picked up. David grinned, hair plastered to his forehead, his small backpack bouncing as he skidded to a stop beside me. "I just wanted to show you. Rocky won first place at the dog show." He pulled a small blue ribbon from his bag, proudly waving it. Rocky barked once, tail wagging despite the rain. I couldn't help but smile. "That's great, kid, but you need to get home before this storm hits. It's going to be bad." Lightning cracked in the distance, sharp and bright, followed by a deep growl of thunder that made Rocky flinch. Okay, David said, climbing back onto his bike. "See you tomorrow." He pushed off, the tires slipping slightly on the wet gravel, Rocky running close at his side. I stood there a moment longer, watching them fade into the darkness, a boy and his dog against the storm. The wind howled louder. The rain came hard and fast, turning the road into a blur of water and mud. I was about to lock the gate when I heard it, a sound that froze my blood. A high, desperate yelp, Rocky, then the screech of tires, a crash and silence. I didn't think. I just ran. My boots splashed through puddles, my flashlight bouncing as I sprinted down the road. The storm roared around me, thunder cracking like the sky was breaking apart. When I reached the bend, I saw it. David's bike twisted in the ditch, the front wheel bent. The headlights of a pickup truck glared through the rain, its driver standing frozen, hand over his mouth. And there, lying a few feet ahead, was Rocky, motionless, soaked. One paw stretched toward the boy who was sitting in the mud, crying his name. Rocky, get up!" David's voice was raw, frantic. I dropped beside them, heart hammering. Rocky's chest rose shallow, barely there. His eyes blinked once, then focused on David. I pressed my hand to his side, warm but weak. "We need to get him out of the rain," I said. The driver mumbled apologies, tears mixing with the rain. "He just ran out. I didn't see him. He jumped in front of the bike." I didn't answer. I just lifted Rocky carefully, cradling him in my arms as the boy followed close, clutching the soaked blue ribbon like it could fix everything. We reached my truck, doors rattling from the wind. I wrapped Rocky in my jacket, David sitting beside him, whispering, "Hold on, boy, please." I drove as fast as the storm would let me, wipers thrashing uselessly. The nearest animal hospital was 15 minutes away. Every second felt like an hour. Rocky whimpered once, barely audible. David held his paw, tears streaming down his face. "You can't leave me," he kept saying. "You can't." When we finally skidded into the vet's parking lot, I jumped out before the engine even stopped. The doors flew open, nurses rushing out as I shouted, "He's been hit! Please help him!" They took him from my arms, rushing down the hallway. David and I stood in the waiting room, dripping water onto the tile. The thunder outside faded into a dull echo, replaced by the hum of fluorescent lights and the pounding of my own heart. After what felt like forever, the vet came out, a woman in her 50s, tired eyes, kind voice. "He's alive," she said, and David gasped, clutching my arm. "But it's bad. His ribs are fractured, one lung collapsed, internal bleeding. We can operate, but there's a chance he won't make it." David's voice trembled. "Please save him, please. He saved me once." The vet nodded softly. "We'll do everything we can." They wheeled Rocky into surgery. Hours passed. The rain slowed, turned to a drizzle, then stopped. The waiting room emptied, but we stayed. David sat curled in the chair, his hands still holding the ribbon, eyes red but fierce. Around 3 a.m, the vet returned. "He made it through surgery," she said. "He's strong, but the next 24 hours are critical." Relief washed over us like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Can I see him?" David asked. "Just for a minute," the vet smiled, quietly. Rocky was lying on a soft blanket, breathing slow, machines beeping gently beside him. His chest was wrapped, his fur shaved in places, but when David whispered his name, his ears twitched. "Hey, buddy," David said softly. "You're gonna be okay. You're my hero, remember?" Rocky opened his eyes and looked at him, a weak wag of the tail tapping the edge of the blanket. I had to turn away for a moment, blinking hard. The vet was right. He was strong. Stronger than most people I'd known. For days we visited. David brought small drawings, little stories he wrote about their adventures, how Rocky fought dragons, rescued lost puppies, became a hero in every one. The staff loved it. They started calling him the Miracle Dog. Rocky healed, slowly but surely. A month later, the bandages came off. He limped a little at first, but soon he was running again, chasing balls, barking at pigeons, wagging that proud tail like nothing could ever break him. The day he came home, the whole neighborhood came out to see. Kids cheered, parents clapped, even the vet stopped by to drop off his final checkup papers. David hugged Rocky tight and whispered, "You'll never be alone again." I believed him. For a long time, it seemed like that promise would hold forever. But forever is a fragile thing. A year passed. David grew taller, stronger. He and Rocky became local legends, the boy and the dog who never gave up. They helped at the shelter, raised money for rescues, even appeared on local TV once. Life had finally become good. Then, one summer afternoon, while helping his dad fix a fence behind their house, David fell. It was small, a slip from a ladder, nothing serious at first. He laughed, brushed it off, said he was fine. But by evening, he was pale, dizzy, his breathing shallow. The hospital tests came fast, the words even faster, internal bleeding from a ruptured vessel, a rare condition. Surgery was scheduled immediately. I was there when they wheeled him in. Rocky barked once, low and panicked, tugging against the leash like he knew something terrible was coming. The doctor looked grim. Hours passed again, and when the door finally opened, I saw it in their faces before they even spoke. David didn't make it. I don't remember what happened after that. Just silence. His parents cried until their voices broke. The hospital halls that once echoed with laughter felt hollow. Rocky lay outside the room, head on his paws, refusing to move. For 2 days, he stayed there. No food, no sound, no movement. Just waiting again, like before. The same loyalty. The same heartbreak. I tried everything to get him to leave, but he wouldn't. Finally, the father came out, knelt beside him, and whispered, "He's gone." "Boy." Rocky looked up, eyes wet and distant, then laid his head back down. That night, they buried David under the old oak tree behind their house, the one where he and Rocky used to play. The red sock was placed beside him, and Rocky stayed by that grave all night, curled against the earth like he could still protect him from the world. Days turned into weeks, and still he didn't leave. Rain, wind, cold, it didn't matter. He'd wander off only to drink from the creek nearby, then return, guarding that patch of ground like it held the universe. I visited often, bringing food, sitting beside him in silence. "You don't have to stay here," I'd whisper. But he'd just look at me, eyes saying what words couldn't. "This is where I belong." The seasons changed again. Summer's green gave way to gold, then faded into winter's gray. Every day, Rocky stayed at the same place, lying beside the small mound under the oak tree where David rested. Snow gathered on his fur like frost on an old statue, but he never flinched. The neighbors brought him food, blankets, even tried to build a little wooden shelter near the grave, but Rocky always chose the open ground. The cold didn't bother him as much as the silence did. He missed the laughter that once filled the air, the sound of the bicycle chain spinning down the hill, the soft voice that used to whisper his name. Some evenings I'd find him staring at the horizon, his ears twitching at every sound, as if he still believed that any moment David would come running through the tall grass with a red sock in his hand. But he never did. One night I brought him a piece of steak from my dinner. I sat down next to him, leaning against the trunk of the oak. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the wind carried the smell of rain. "It's been a year, boy," I said softly. You've kept your promise." Rocky didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the headstone. "He'd be proud of you," I added, "but you can't stay here forever." He sighed, a long, low sound, and rested his head on the ground the same way he had in that hospital room so long ago. I looked at him and realized something that hurt more than I expected. He wasn't just waiting. He was remembering. Every gust of wind, every sound of footsteps on the road, it wasn't hope anymore. It was memory. The kind of loyalty that doesn't fade, even when the reason for it is gone. That night, the rain began to fall again, steady and cold. I covered Rocky with my coat, but he didn't move. He just closed his eyes. I stayed until dawn. When the first light broke through the branches, he finally stood, stretched slowly, and walked to the creek to drink. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was ready to move on. But when I came back later that afternoon, he was gone. At first, I thought he'd wandered off, maybe found his way to the old warehouse, the place where it had all begun. I searched for hours, through fields, along the road, behind the stores, but there was no sign of him. The next morning, I found him halfway across town, lying near the warehouse fence, the spot where he'd first met David. He looked thinner, weaker. The red ribbon from Christmas still hung around his collar, faded and frayed. He lifted his head when he saw me, tail wagging once, faint but real. I knelt beside him, running my hand through his fur. "You found your way back," I whispered. He pressed his nose into my palm, breathing shallowly. "You miss him, huh?" He blinked slowly, like that was the only answer he could give. I carried him to my truck, wrapped him in a blanket, and brought him home. I set up a warm bed near the heater, gave him food and water, and sat beside him through the night. He ate a little, then rested his head on my leg. His breathing was rough, uneven. I called the vet the next morning. She came to my house, examined him gently, then looked at me with sad eyes. "He's old," she said quietly. "His heart's failing. There's not much we can do except keep him comfortable." "He's not that old," I said, my voice breaking. "He was just a puppy. He's lived hard," she replied. Too much grief for one soul. I nodded, unable to speak. When she left, I sat beside him for hours. I told him stories about the kids who still rode their bikes through the lot, about how the hospital now had a therapy program named after him, about the shelter where his story helped other dogs find homes. He listened, eyes half open, tail twitching with every familiar word. Then I pulled something from my pocket, a small piece of red cloth. The sock. I'd kept it after the funeral, folded away like a relic. When I held it up, Rocky lifted his head for the first time in hours. He sniffed it, then licked it once and laid his paw gently on top of it, just like he used to when he was young. That night, he slept peacefully, dreaming, I hoped, of better days. In the morning, he was gone. I found him lying by the door, the red sock still under his paw. The sunrise poured through the window, golden and soft, painting his fur with light. He looked calm, at peace, like he'd finally followed the one he'd been waiting for. I buried him beneath the oak tree, right beside David. It felt right, the two of them together again, boy and dog, side by side where nothing could separate them anymore. The whole neighborhood came to say goodbye. Even the hospital nurse who'd once kept Rocky's secret stood there, tears glistening as she placed a single white flower on his grave. The father spoke a few words, voice shaking. He wasn't just a dog. He was family. He was David's heart walking on four legs. The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves, and for a moment I thought I heard a soft bark echo through the air. A sound that felt like goodbye. Weeks turned into months. The world moved on. But the oak tree became a place people visited often. Children left small toys there. Dog owners brought treats. Some days I'd see a stranger kneel, whisper something, and walk away smiling sadly. Maybe they'd heard the story, how a boy and his dog found each other in a broken world and refused to let go. I never stopped visiting. Every Sunday I'd bring flowers, sit under the oak, and talk like old times. And every spring wildflowers bloomed over their graves, bright red and yellow, spreading wider each year. I like to think it was Rocky's way of smiling. But one day something strange happened. I was sitting there half dozing in the afternoon warmth when I heard it, a faint sound of paws behind me. I turned, half expecting it to be some neighborhood dog. Instead, I saw a small German Shepherd pup standing by the fence, head tilted, tail wagging uncertainly. He looked almost like Rocky had on that first day, thin, shy, eyes too old for his size. I froze. The pup sniffed the air, then walked straight toward the graves. He stopped, sat down between the two headstones, and let out a quiet whine. My throat tightened. "Hey there, little one," I said softly, kneeling down. "Where'd you come from?" He didn't move. Just looked up at me with those same brown eyes, full of something familiar, trust, pain, hope. Around his neck was a torn piece of red cloth. My heart stopped. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But there it was, faded, frayed, almost dust, but red. He licked my hand once, then laid down right where Rocky used to. I didn't move for a long time, just watched him breathe, feeling the strange warmth that only came from things you couldn't explain. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe someone nearby had heard the story and left the pup there. Or maybe some love is too strong to end. That evening, I brought him home. I named him Chance, because that's what life had just given me. And when he curled up by the heater, paws tucked, eyes closing with the same quiet trust Rocky once had, I knew one thing for sure. Some souls find their way back, no matter how far they've gone. The town woke to silence. News spread fast. A broken bridge, a rescue, a boy saved by his dog. People came from everywhere, reporters, neighbors, strangers. They brought flowers, candles, even toys, placing them by the riverbank where the rescue team had found David. The boy lived, though he was weak, shaken, and quiet for days. But Rocky never came back. They searched for him for 3 whole days, boats on the river, divers in the cold water, even drones overhead, but nothing. No trace, no collar, no red sock, nothing but silence and the steady flow of the river. I was there every day, standing by the edge, staring into the water, hoping for a miracle again. But this time the miracle didn't come. David stayed home for weeks. He didn't talk much, didn't eat, just sat by the window with the old red sock in his hand. Sometimes he'd whisper Rocky's name so softly it sounded like a prayer. And then one morning, just as spring began to fade into summer, something happened. I was opening the warehouse gates when I heard a bark. Faint, distant, but so familiar it froze me mid-step. I turned. At first I saw nothing but the shimmer of heat on the road. Then, far away, a shadow moved. A limp, slow shape, staggering but steady. My heart started racing. I ran. The closer I got, the clearer it became. Mud-covered fur, tired eyes, a torn collar hanging loose. "Rocky!" I shouted. He lifted his head. His tail moved once, and then he collapsed. I dropped to my knees beside him, hands trembling, heart pounding. He was breathing, weak, shallow, but alive. I scooped him up, carried him back through the gate, yelling for help. We rushed him to the vet, who worked for hours, bandaging, cleaning, whispering under his breath about miracles. "This dog shouldn't be alive," he said, shaking his head. But somehow, he made it. The moment they called David to tell him, I heard the boy's cry through the phone. Half an hour later, he burst into the clinic, tears streaming down his face, and threw his arms around Rocky. "You came back," he whispered over and over. "You came back." Rocky's tail thumped weakly, his eyes half open, but in that moment they didn't need words. The bond between them said everything. It took months for Rocky to heal completely. His limp never went away, but his spirit did, stronger than ever. He followed David everywhere again, to school, to the yard, to the warehouse. The red sock, though faded and torn, still hung from his mouth wherever he went. The story spread everywhere. The dog who came back. TV stations ran it. Animal shelters used it in campaigns about loyalty and love. People sent letters from across the country calling Rocky a hero. But for David, Rocky wasn't a hero. He was family. One summer evening, I visited them. The air smelled of warm grass and rain. David was sitting on the porch, sketching something on a piece of paper. Rocky lay beside him, head resting on his paws. "What are you drawing?" I asked. David smiled and turned the page around. It was a picture of a boy and a dog, standing together under a bridge, the river shining behind them. "It's us," he said. "That night." "It's beautiful," I told him. He nodded, looking down at Rocky. "I think he'll always come back," he said softly. "No matter what," I believed him. Years went by. David grew older, stronger, his laughter returning, his courage unbroken. Rocky grew slower, grayer, his eyes softer but still full of light. They were inseparable right till the end. When Rocky finally passed, it was a quiet morning. The sky was clear, the air still. David was by his side, holding that same red sock, whispering, "Thank you for never giving up." They buried him near the riverbank, under the big oak tree where they used to play. David carved a small stone marker himself. It read, "Rocky, the dog who waited, the dog who came back." People still visit that spot. Sometimes they bring flowers, sometimes toys. But every spring when the river rises and the air smells of rain, I swear you can still hear it. A faint bark in the wind, echoing through the trees. Not a sad one. A promise kept. A love that never ended. Years slipped by like pages turning in a quiet book. Seasons changed, people grew older, buildings rose where fields once stood, but some things never faded. The story of Rocky and David became something of a legend in our small town. Kids whispered it on stormy nights. Old men told it at the cafe over steaming cups of coffee. They said it wasn't just about a boy and a dog, it was about faith, loyalty, and the kind of love that doesn't end when the heartbeat stops. I still worked at the warehouse, though it was bigger now, more modern. The old gatehouse was replaced by a small office, but I kept the red sock, yes, the same one. David had given it to me before he left for college. "Keep it safe," he said, smiling. "It's part of both of us now." He was taller then, his voice deeper, but his eyes were still full of that same light I'd seen the day Rocky came back. I watched him drive away, feeling proud and old at the same time. He studied animal science, then veterinary medicine, then something called canine behavior therapy. Said he wanted to understand how love worked inside a dog's heart, how they could heal people without saying a word. Years later, when he came back home, he didn't come alone. He brought blueprints, boxes, and a dream he called the Rocky Foundation. It started small, a shelter built near the riverbank where Rocky was buried. The sign out front read, "Every life deserves a second chance." David designed it himself. Wide fields for the dogs to run, clean kennels, a training area, even a tiny clinic. He hired volunteers, local vets, students who wanted to learn. The first dog they rescued was a trembling stray found near the highway, a thin, scarred German shepherd. "She's scared," David said, kneeling beside her, "but she'll trust again." They named her Hope, and she did trust again. Soon, word spread, and more people came. Families looking to adopt, people wanting to volunteer, kids wanting to learn about compassion. The Rocky Foundation became a symbol of everything good that can grow from loss. I visited often. Sometimes, when the wind blew from the river, I'd walk to the oak tree where Rocky rested. The grass around it was always greenest there, like life itself refused to let go. David placed a small wooden bench nearby with a plaque that read, "For the one who waited." He'd sit there sometimes, late at night, sketching or thinking. One evening I joined him. The air smelled of pine and rain, and the river shimmered with the last light of sunset. "Do you ever stop missing him?" I asked quietly. David smiled, eyes on the water. "No," he said, "but missing him doesn't hurt anymore. It reminds me to be kind." "He'd be proud of you," I said. "Maybe," he whispered. "But I think he already knows." A moment of silence passed. Then David reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, an old, faded red sock, stitched carefully along the edge. "I kept the other one," he said, placing it on the bench. "It belongs here." He laid it beneath the plaque, and for a second the breeze lifted it, just a little, like a tail wagging in approval. The years rolled forward. The foundation grew into something far bigger than any of us expected. Branches opened in nearby towns, then across the country. They rescued dogs from floods, earthquakes, and cruelty. Each dog they saved carried a tag engraved with the same words, "Rocky's Promise, never leave, never give up." David became known everywhere, on TV, in magazines, at conferences. People admired his calmness, his patience, the way animals trusted him instantly. But to those of us who knew the real story, He was still that boy in the hospital bed, holding on to a dream that refused to die. One winter, many years later, David returned to the river alone. Snow covered the ground, the air sharp and quiet. I saw him from a distance, walking slowly toward the oak. His hair had begun to gray. His steps were heavier now. But when he reached the tree, he knelt, brushing snow from the stone. "Hey, old friend," he whispered. "Guess what? We saved over 10,000 dogs this year." The wind rustled softly through the branches, and a single leaf drifted down, landing near his hand. He smiled. "I knew you'd like that." Then he sat for a long while, watching the river flow just as it had the night Rocky jumped in, wild, cold, endless. He closed his eyes. "You taught me everything," he murmured. "How to fight, how to forgive, how to love." A soft bark echoed faintly across the water. Distant, like memory, like music. David didn't look up. He didn't need to. He just smiled through the tears. "I know," he said. "I miss you too." That spring, the foundation built something new, a bridge near the rescue center. Strong, wide, lined with carvings of paw prints. They named it Rocky's Crossing. On the day it opened, children ran across it with their dogs, laughing. David stood at the middle, hands in his pockets, looking down at the river that had once almost taken everything. He turned to me, smiling softly. "Now no one has to fall again," he said. I nodded. "He'd like that." "He'd love it," David replied. A photographer captured that moment, the man and the bridge, the water flowing beneath, sunlight breaking through clouds. It became the image that defined the foundation's legacy, love rebuilt into something strong enough to carry others. Years later, when David passed, they buried him beneath that same oak tree beside Rocky. On the stone, the same words appeared again, joined this time with his own name. David Miller. The boy who believed. The man who kept his promise. People still come, even now. They bring flowers, photos, collars, sometimes even letters addressed to Rocky. Children sit by the tree, listening to their parents tell the story. The dog who waited. The boy who woke. The love that didn't end. And when the wind moves through the branches, you can almost hear it. The bark, the laughter, the heartbeat of a story that refuses to fade. Because somewhere, beyond time and memory, a boy is still running by the river, and a German shepherd is still beside him, red sock in his mouth, both of them whole again. Rocky's legacy. Forever years passed, then decades, yet the name Rocky never disappeared. It was printed on shelter vans that roamed the world after hurricanes, engraved on clinic doors from Canada to Kenya, stitched on vests worn by rescue dogs who sniffed through rubble after earthquakes. Wherever there was loss, somewhere nearby there was a glimmer of hope painted with a red paw print, the symbol of the Rocky Foundation. The story had become more than legend. It was now curriculum. Children learned it in classrooms when teachers spoke about empathy. Firefighters wore it as a patch on their sleeves. Even hospitals used the Rocky Companion program, pairing therapy dogs with recovering patients. One of them, a nervous little shepherd mix named Luna, had once been found trembling in an alley. She now walked hospital corridors daily, resting her head on children's beds, just as Rocky had done for David. One crisp autumn afternoon, the foundation hosted its 50th anniversary gathering at the rescue park by the old river. I was there, older and slower, my hair silver like the frost that glittered on the grass. Thousands came, families, volunteers, and hundreds of dogs, barking joyfully under the wide blue sky. The oak tree towered above them all, its trunk wrapped with ribbons and photos. At its base lay 2 stones side by side, and between them the faded red sock, preserved behind clear glass. A young woman stepped up to the microphone. She had David's eyes. "My grandfather taught me that love isn't measured by how long something lasts," she said, voice trembling, "but by how deeply it changes us. Because of Rocky, because of one loyal heart, millions of lives were changed." She pointed toward the river, where the new generation of pups played. "Every rescue we make, every life we save, carries their promise forward." The crowd applauded softly, tears glinting in the sunlight. As the ceremony ended, people drifted away, leaving offerings at the tree. Collars, photos, flowers, toys. When dusk came and the last light rippled across the river, I lingered alone. The wind whispered through the branches, and the air felt suddenly warmer. For a heartbeat, the world went quiet. Then, faintly, I heard it, the soft thud of paws in grass. I turned, and there he was, Rocky. Young again, coat gleaming, eyes bright as morning. Beside him stood David, smiling, no longer burdened by years. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The boy reached down, the dog leapt up, and in that perfect motion, everything the world had ever broken was whole again. They began to walk along the riverbank, side by side, toward a horizon brushed with gold. The red sock swung gently from Rocky's mouth, catching the last light of the setting sun. When they reached the bridge, they paused. David looked back once, as if to say thank you, for remembering, for keeping the promise alive. Then they crossed, fading into the glow until only the sound of the river remained. I stayed there a long time, smiling through tears. Because I knew now what love truly was, not a story that ends, but one that keeps walking, paw print after paw print, heart after heart, and somewhere, every time a rescued dog finds its forever home, a soft bark echoes in the wind, a reminder from a faithful German shepherd who never left. Rocky's legacy lives forever.